So
There
everyone,
are two
thanks
screens.
very much for joining me. Are you all comfortable with your places and your videos and your audios?
I'm
If
okay.
you're
Mine
all
is
right.
fixed.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
As long as the internet is okay, it should be fine. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think we'll be all right. And I'm really delighted to have the three of you here today. Kaustubh, you're the last one to join, so I'll begin the introductions with you.
So,
I mean, you were hesitant to tell me that you are a Dr. Kaustubh Deka. So, and I hope I've pronounced that right. I know you're a
yeah,
columnist
perfect. Yeah.
and a commentator. And of course, you're an associate professor, right, at the Dibrugarh
No, assistant
University.
professor. Yeah.
So it's truly, I'm really looking forward to speaking with you, and also, of course, with the two ladies, Dr. Alana Golmai. She is a lawyer, a humanitarian, and a general secretary of the Northeast Support Center and Helpline. Alana, thank you so much for joining me. And last and definitely not the least, Hasina Kadbi. I hope I'm getting your pronunciations right, because as I was telling Kaustubh, I'm a Punjabi. I can pronounce it in many, many ways. And so I'm going to stick to Hasina before I go any further. And Hasina is the founder and managing director of Impulse Social Enterprises, amongst many other hats that she wears. All that information is, of course, on my post. And thank you very much for joining me today. I think this conversation, in many, many ways. You know, that the reason that I wanted to start this conversation actually is from something that it's from a very small thing. And so, you know, on Table Talk, I wanted to get a broader perspective on it, for the simple reason that there was a tweet that I put up on, you know, once Mirabai won her silver. And in fact, it was a conversation that I had with her on Table Talk just the day after she won her silver medal, on the fact that, you know, how does she think that the rest of the country perceives the region, you know, the 7 states, and whether, you know, okay, we've lost Kaustubh, I'm sure he'll join again, and whether, you know, that there's some kind of resentment, or whether there's a feeling of, you know, you get upset by the fact that the medal has come and there's this enormous kind of adulation that comes in. But is that love fest actually momentary? So I want to start with you, Hasina. Tell me, what has been the reaction? I'm not saying to the medals; those were expected. I mean, Mirabai and of course Lavlina and even Chanu in the hockey team. They're following from Mary Com's footsteps. So I'm not surprised with that. But tell me, what's been the reaction in the rest of the country to athletes from the Northeast who've done well?
I think if I start back, that every time there is an Olympic or an Asian game or all the games that happen, then when there's a winning that happens from the Northeast, then the center stage comes in the Northeast. After that, everything is forgotten. You know, it happens this time and again and time and again. And the reason for that is that anything which puts India at a center stage in the world, and when there's a winning and it happens to be people who work really hard from the region, who the media might not really even recognize the hard work or the fact that they are representing the country. You know, I mean, there was no media attention when they have to go all the way to participate, which was equally important, like how the media attention come for the rest of many, many players in India. But the moment there's a winning, then the center stage takes, you know, as one of the major part of what Northeast is all about. And for me, it's like, in so many years, why is it so? There's so much more in the Northeast. You know, Northeast is just not about few people. They work hard. I appreciate that. And I think they've done tremendously hard work. But then it's just the medal that get them center stage. But I don't think there's any kind of follow-up on the real work, on the story behind them and how they made it. You know, so that I think I would open with that and leave the other two to join in on how they feel about it.
So Alana, you tell me, do you think that this again will be momentary, or, you know, this could be, there's a little shift this time around?
For me, I would say that it is momentary, unfortunately, because whenever, like Hasina mentioned, only when there are winnings, like only when there are medals, you know, India, the entire country seems to celebrate. And you have seen Salman Khan coming out and posing with Mirabai, and you have seen Sachin Tendulkar coming out and posing. But I feel that this is only a floating, kind of celebration. They have not really understood, the state. For example, if it is Manipur, Manipur is well known for a place where there's so many sports persons, but then only medal seems to be something that will attract the rest of India to, come out and celebrate. So I think there are many others to celebrate, because journey itself, like Hasina mentioned, that journey itself is a reward, journey itself is a victory. Why would suppose then if they did not bring some laurels or some medals, then they would not celebrate. I mean, representing the country itself and giving an effort itself should also be recognized, and not because of the medal alone. This is what I feel. Yeah.
I think I'm trying to figure out where this audio blip. Yes, there is some ambient noise. I was going to say that as well. Is that something you guys are listening to as well?
Yeah.
There is. Kaustubh, is that you? Maybe
pressure. Like whistle.
Yeah.
Pressure or something like
I
that.
think I think it is his connection, because Kaustubh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds better. So, or not. I'm trying to wonder where this noise is coming from, and
Okay.
okay. So I don't know what to do actually. Should you? Do you want to disconnect and try again, Kaustubh? Because I think it is coming from you.
Okay. I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine. We'll have figured it out. If it's not you, then it's going to be a.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Hasina, the thing is that does this begin from the very fact that when we talk about the northeast of India, we cluster it together. It's very easy for us to say northeast in itself. We don't go into the diversity of it, the fact that these are 7 beautiful states that have all got their own personal identity in a sense. So, okay, Kaustubh is back. Kaustubh, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. And
Okay.
was that the noise?
Yes,
Was it
I
from
think.
here?
Yes, I think so. I think it's much
Okay,
better.
maybe.
So, okay, let
Yeah.
me get back to you first, Kaustubh, and I'll come back to you, Hasina. I was talking to the ladies and talking about the medals that have come, and we were trying to wonder if
Okay.
this is, if this is the kind of reaction from the rest of the country to the athletes of the Northeast. Is that something that is expected and momentary, or has something shifted this time?
I would say, I mean, it will depend on how we look at it. I mean, here there is a potential, there is a possibility actually to have some kind of a long-term, effect out of this whole achievement. That is definitely a very grand achievement, and it has kind of electrified the atmosphere, even within Northeast, I would say. So it really depends on how we take it from here. At the same time, I do agree with both my co-panelists that, one has to put it in certain perspectives, right? We have to understand this achievement as part of a outcome of a long journey. We have to understand some very complex history behind it. We have to also understand maybe coming of age of Northeast as in a unit or a category or some kind of special region. So, I mean, all this have to be factored into. But at the same time, I do believe that, I mean, many factors, maybe while we discuss a bit today along the way, we can talk about all those factors. But I do feel it is special this time. And I have my reasons for that. And but again, as I say, I mean, it all depends on, how we take it from here. And there are good grounds also to be skeptical. I do agree that given the past history, we all, I mean, are a bit kind of, skeptical about it.
But
But
there's no harm
yeah.
in being optimistic. So I want to know really what are your reasoning for being positive? There's no harm.
No, I mean, there has been, see, this is 2021 now. So, I mean, this is actually, I mean, I can talk about Lovelina specifically and Assam specifically. I won't go so much into, I know, Mirabai, Chanu. I mean, I've talked more about Lovelina. I mean, how we see it here also, it is that it is actually, things started to change. There was a very crucial national games in Assam in 2010. It was held in Assam National Games, and that was the time when Assam was much more quote unquote disturbed compared to today. when within quotes, disturbed within quotes. And that time I remember it was Congress government in power. Congress had a long run in Assam. There were 3 consecutive term Congress had. And that time there was this very famous kind of, much covered by media kind of exchange between the Chief Minister of Assam and the insurgent groups of Assam, where the insurgent groups of Assam in fact said that they welcome this and they will not interfere with this. And that was one event that actually also changed the whole sporting environment in Assam in a way. And since then, we have seen there is Sports Authority of India has opened many different small stadiums here and there. So there is a concerted kind of a focus in bringing out small town sports person. Now, Lovelina comes from a very small town. All of you must be knowing that famous story by now that only after her medal, the road to her house is being paved.
Of course, I saw those pictures.
So, yeah, we often travel through the road. So it's a bordering district of Nagaland, Assam, in fact. So, it's very interesting that people from the small towns are actually now slowly coming out. I agree that there are much more talent out there. Also, as I was raising this point in some recent write-up, that, there are a whole generation before that, in 90s especially, and I'm sure this point will come up in our discussion at some point, maybe, that, there was this whole atmosphere of, armed operation, military operation, counterinsurgency operations, this, that. So there was heavy securitization of the region. It's like a security-centric area, right? Still to many extent, large extent, but 90s especially, to the extent that anyone who looks like a sports person, somebody with a fit, quote unquote, like a so-called fit kind of outlook, would be a prime suspect as a militant. So those were the days of trauma, and a lot of one whole generation, they lived through the trauma. So now that we achieve and we applaud Lovelina, but there are also many others before her perhaps who could not reach that level. They had to go through that kind of, the period of dark chapter basically. Okay. So Assam has come through all that. So that's why I'm saying that it's a continuous kind of a process. So we have to understand the process, how things are unfolding from there. So in that sense, I was saying that maybe this achievement, if government takes it in the right way, or civil society, other groups also kind of takes the real message, positive message out of it, there is a possibility that this can be replicated at many more levels.
So, when you were talking about the road to her house being paved, I want to tell you that that is very quintessential India. So I don't think in that sense there was anything different, because I'm sure that was happening in Haryana. I'm sure that was happening in Punjab and everywhere. Kaustubh, also just to tell you that your audio was clear, but now it's buzzing a little bit, but your picture has been frozen all through. So I don't know what you want to do with that. Hasina, I want to come back to you. And we were talking about the fact that, when we talk about the Northeast as people in the rest of the country, it's very easy to just dismiss it as a single region. But every place has its identity. And every state has its identity. Every state has its good. Every state has its interesting aspects, the environment or the organic stuff, or whatever you look at it, the sporting achievements. What is it that you consider that happens to the rest of the country that it dismisses it as one region? Is it indifference? Is it just ignorance? Or is there more going on here?
So I think if you go back, geographically, the way we are, the 8 states of the Northeast, the 7 sisters and one brother, you go it from a geographical point of view, we happen to look in the map as one region. But I think having to say that, it doesn't mean that you club the whole region as the same focus, because there are uniqueness of every state. That I think that has never come out to the rest of the country. And I think more or less has also happened that many of us who have been working in different sector, we talk the Northeast of India. We use this term very often. We are from the Northeast of India. So I think that is also one way that had allowed, whether it is the media, whether it is people who work in different sectors, of identifying ourselves because of a geographical location and how the states are attached to each other, and having this chicken neck, that connects us to the rest of the country. So I think that is one aspect. The other aspect is that the way each state in the Northeast, when they are trying to bring forward the uniqueness, we get again shadowed by the 8 states. But we never really look deeper that there's uniqueness of culture, there's uniqueness of food, there is a similarities cut across, no doubt about it, but there's also distinguished historical factor of each state that is never brought to light, and I think that has a lot to do because of how media report the Northeast. And I think, rightly said, I think what Kasturba just said just now is that the insurgencies in the Northeast has also brought Northeast a trouble in the past, and when we are evolving, then comes the negligence of how the Northeast is being perceived by the rest of the country. And then when we're looking at geographical location, it's always this isolated part that is always seen as one, but we are 8 of us. So I think that is also something that needs to be broken down in terms of that uniqueness, that each state has its own uniqueness, and it has its cultural diversity within the Northeast itself. It has to be understood that it's beyond geographical location and boundaries and the chicken neck that borders the rest of the country. So I think it's time that with these laurels and with these achievements, that the region, is being showcased once in a while, once in a blue moon, which is great, which is excellent, but needs to be continued, to be dive deeper. People should start coming to know, like, okay, X person is from Manipur. Which place of Manipur is she from? If that become a continuous process, then you are opening up the windows. You're opening up a window which is closed of each state. So I think it has to have a two-way kind of a process. But nevertheless, I think media has always looked at the Northeast only when there is laurels, conflict, insurgencies, or anything that hype up immediately, So that is something that I think it needs a larger discussion. It needs a larger perspective. It needs a larger, somebody to tell the story much, much more larger.
Of course. So Alana, as Hasina just said, it needs a two-way, system to progress. What is that something you would agree with as well?
Yeah, of course. See, like it's not that sports person have not achieved even in the past. There were many people, for of course Mary Kom, who is a 6 times the world gold medalist, and even her movie has been made and by a very well-known actor in the country. And then, of course, it was only that time, they started watching the movie. So has their mindset changed after that? Because me as a person who has been dealing with this very difficult mindset, where we are being misunderstood, like especially when you look at our facial features, it doesn't really figure, in this country. And also that maybe we don't look Indian enough, So that kind of things, didn't change at all. So the mindset is number one, that never changed. So that there's something that awareness is required, which we have been actually advising and also advocating that, maybe it never figured in the books, it doesn't come in the history of the country, So I think Northeast seems to be so far away. So awareness to an extent is really, really required, to make people understand. So it is not there in the school system, school education. Only some people, like, for example, if they're posted, in the Northeast, then only later on they'll come and say that, okay, I have been to the Northeast, I've been posted to that part of the country. But I think they themselves did not really advocate or did not really bring in the diversity of the country. For example, they would only talk about the natural resources, where Northeast has been seen only as a tourist spot, a potential means only to, for the, what you call the corporates to invest. It is something like that. They never see from a cultural perspective, a diverse, ethnic groups, like that. So that's why it's really the way India as a country, the so-called mainstream India, how they understood, like Northeast, is so different from what we expect. Of course, we're not asking for special treatment and Northeast to do this, that. It's not like that. But as a country, Northeast, in terms of geographical also features, also, it is so big. Arunachal Pradesh, like we are not supposed to be clubbed together, which has already mentioned earlier. So I think understanding the Northeast is extremely important. And to that, till today, even instead of celebration, instead of giving some kind of recognition to some of the sports person, it will go back to square one. For me, this is what I see, because during the time of, unfortunately, in the first wave of COVID-19 last year, what happened? Because we're also being termed as a carrier of the virus, and we are being called Chinese and said that we are a, carrier of coronavirus and you are spreading the virus. So, for example, you're celebrating the success of, Mirabai and Lavina in one place, in one corner of the country. You are also again doing this kind of discrimination, I would call. It's still happening. So, I mean, in this way, I'm sure, I think it is something that collective effort is required, and the center can do something. I mean, so to raise this awareness, something has to be done here.
So, Kaustav, I was actually just going to come to that racism that
Sure.
has increased, I think, over the last year and a half due to the pandemic. But before that, also Elena mentioned the movie Mary Com. Does
Yeah.
Bollywood then, with that stereotyping of not taking an actor from from the region itself, or at least from
Oh,
Manipur,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
does it just propagate these stereotypes then that we see, in real life?
Absolutely. Can you see and hear me first of all? I mean,
I,
some problem with my
I,
screen, you're saying.
we can see you. The picture continues to be
Yeah.
frozen, but we can hear you.
Okay, okay, fine. That's enough then. No, I mean, absolutely, you are very right. I mean, in fact, moment Lovelina got this medal, one of the early tweet I was out of wit, I was tweeting that, like Bollywood, please make sure this time that, you don't take another Chopra, Khan or Kapoor as, Lovelina now. Because, or
Okay.
Mirabai also, because that's central to the whole politics of representation, is very central that you be true to what you're representing, and if you kind of manipulate at that level, of course your whole agenda falls kind of flat. So, and that's a very dangerous line. I mean, just imagine there's a Hollywood movie on Muhammad Ali, and perhaps
And yeah,
perhaps maybe Russell Crowe is playing Muhammad Ali. So I mean, it's like
right,
as
absolutely.
silly as
It's
that,
the
right?
same thing. It is.
Yeah, yeah. So it
So
is as silly as that. So I mean, there has to be that sensitivity, of course, from Bollywood. It has its own region, of course. It says that taking some star like Priyanka Chopra has a wider kind of reach. The message will go to more masses. Those arguments are, of course, there. And I remember in Priyanka, this movie when it came out, there was a very good debate on that. Different people wrote, and there are a lot of arguments, counter arguments. But just what Alana just now mentioned, I think it's very true that more thing changes, perhaps more things remain same. Because I remember in 2000, it was it 14 or 12, I'm a bit confused. Commonwealth game when it happened, there was India played very well in hockey. It reached a very good stage, and there were two very good midfielder in the Indian team from Manipur. Two Meitei, two guys were there, and they were playing very well. I remember those days we used to write a lot about it. We were like, after today's win, do not ever ask where Manipur is. Like, after today's win, don't repeat the question, where is Manipur?
yeah,
But we know that these questions never gets old, right? So, I mean, those ignorance largely remains. And of course, these agencies like Bollywood, maybe to a large extent, even the problems with textbook of India, those different kind of, there are different areas which has to take responsibility for this. So having said that, I mean, that is, of course, the question now is that can sportsmen and sportswomen, can they bridge this identity gap? Can they bridge this gap in representation? So this, I think that's why this type of dialogues that we're having today, or other different stories, now media is extensively covering actually this two sportswomen. So these can be actually, this can be more in depth, and as Hasina has been rightly saying, that it has to go beyond just reportage. It has to go
yeah,
beyond, it has to bring out their life stories, right? I mean, it has to kind of, place them in the right history. That's why I keep mentioning about militarization, because you cannot talk of Northeast without understanding the militarization at the same time. Because it is not just any other state. These states have laws like Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which puts a lot of restriction on daily movement of people. It puts a lot of restriction on so many other things. So it is not very easy for people to come out of these regions and claim this type of center stage. And despite that, some people are achieving that, which is, I think, quite a feat. And so these things also we have to kind of place side by side. I mean, this kind of some kind of, you can say, reign of exception, and at the same time, a lot of money coming in also. Northeast has a lot of attention by the different ministries. Like, I mean, there is no dearth of funds in one sense. If you talk in one sense, there is a lot of fund coming in. There is a lot of schemes coming in for Northeast.
yeah.
So that's why I keep emphasizing on the right usage. If one is wise, one is pragmatic, one is careful, one can use these opportunities also. There's a lot of attention. Now it's a different debate about this kind of neoliberal development. What will the eventual goal of activist policy? This kind of flow of money, this type of transnational corporations coming in. this international capital coming in. This is a very large and complex debate. But what I'm saying is that, I mean, there is also a lot of investment in sports infrastructure that ways. There are a lot of stadiums coming in, a lot of facilities coming in. So one has to be very creative and very pragmatic and very, in a way, smart in tapping into these opportunities now. Of course, it's not that easy. There are a lot of political factors, but one can make a beginning.
Absolutely. So Hasina, what I was saying a little bit earlier and taking off from what Alana had also said about the fact that during the pandemic there has been just an increase in the amount of racism we've been hearing, the kind of stories that we've been hearing, just random people calling girls Corona or spitting on them or covering their face and walking off. That stereotype image, how rampant do you think it is still? Is it still a rampant part of that so-called mainland in a sense?
I think in many ways, it's rampant of the fact that there is the uniqueness of the features that many of us in the Northeast are. And unless that is being understood, this complex issue of racism of people from the Northeast will continue to happen. And there has to be a way out of how this complexity can be broken down through larger discussion and larger understanding of the region. For some states, I mean, if you look at 8 states, there is difference in terms of each one of us, how we look. There are strange uniqueness of certain states in the Northeast that completely does not identify with the general population of the rest of India. But having said that, India is very diverse, in many, many ways, but there's a huge diversity that we have from the Northeast. Racism has existed, has continued to exist, has flared in many ways. And I think COVID-19 had showed the flaring in a really bad shape, where it became really, really bad in terms of the fact, I mean, Alana can really add on to that because as a person who addressed these issues and a person who I admire the fact that, not that because she's our partner, but because she's a person who stood on to get support to a lot of, people from the Northeast in Delhi, which is quite a difficult state otherwise to really handle situation of racism. That there has to be a way out, like communicating about the diversity of the Northeast, communicating about the complexities of having much more, I think, textbook. They have to start speaking about the Northeast. It's high time that the government take some really drastic thing to talk about the region. The mainstream media will really have to start talking about the difference about how people are from the Northeast. There has to be continuity on that. I think I will take back from Kasturba saying that there's so much resources coming to the Northeast. I won't deny that, but that resources has never filtered down to the ground. People like us who really work on the ground knows that the announcement of all the schemes, whether to bring in diversity, to bring in educating the Northeast, bring in a lot of that, it has never filtered down to real dialogue, real emphasizing of the region. So that is also a bridge. And if you're looking at media existing from the Northeast, I think half of the media which is existing from the Northeast are politically owned. I'm sorry to use that word, but they're politically owned. So they've never really invested in those resources that has come in the Northeast to actually start speaking about the Northeast or talking it more in the larger sense. I mean, I think the non-political owned media is only, I mean, East Mojo. I mean, when Karma came back and started East Mojo, it's like not a political owned, but it's a journalist who spent so many years in a field and deciding to give back to the region. But if you look at many, it is politically owned. So what is their responsibility when they're using the resources that is from the country? What is their responsibility to actually bring in this diversity to the rest of the country? Are they not responsible enough with that entire amount of money to really bring in the Northeast to be understood by the rest of the country? I mean, that is another way of looking at the flip side of resources in the Northeast, if we really have to bridge this gap, because media is powerful, I mean, how many of the media owned in the Northeast is doing these deep dive stories of all these winners who have come back from the Northeast, besides just one, press release and some great pictures and so on? I think it's time they could just work around that and showcase much more deeper. and use this kind of winning as a way to tell the stories of the Northeast in the lighter, better perspective. I see it, that is a positive way of using resources in the right way, challenging the situation of racism of the Northeast, and giving a window to the Northeast to bridge this gap which has happened in for so many years now.
Absolutely. So, Alana, you're the right person, as Hasina also said, to bring this up, because you're based in Delhi, but your helpline reaches out to, everybody from the Northeast who is in the capital. What kind of a surge did you see during COVID?
As I already mentioned that, as coronavirus being suspected to be from the Wuhan. So that's how actually, they feel that, I mean, I would say that maybe the larger population, like Indian citizens, they just want to blame on the others, that they don't want to take it to themselves that, this happens to everyone. I mean, and then who is spreading this virus to whom? I mean, so just like that, as I also kind of the stereotyping is so rampant that that's how anybody who looks like Asian, and then who looks this Mongoloid and who looks a little bit like a Chinese are being just targeted. So even despite the fact that the fact that they have shown their ID card also to enter in the shop to buy ration. My point is that whether you are a Chinese or whether you are a person from any other parts of the country, just because you look Mongoloid, that doesn't mean that you have to stop anybody from buying that in the groceries or any other thing. So not to that extent, I mean, and also they have been evicted from their rented accommodation, saying that they were spreading, the virus in the society, and also in the neighbors. And not only that, they're also being falsely quarantined, saying that you are the one spreading the virus. Therefore, and then some boys and girls were actually dragged out from their house, and then they were taken to a quarantine center and then put them for maybe 24 hours like that. So a lot of these things they have to go through. So the point here is that so these boys and girls, they will go back home to the Northeast, and they are going to carry back home very bitter memories. I mean, this itself is not really healthy, if you're talking about in terms of peace, in terms of harmony, in terms of national integration, that kind of bridging the gap, because you're already creating that negativity in the young minds, and then you're already creating the kind of stereotyping. So I think everyone, in a sense, like one factor is that law is also very important. So when a young woman from Manipur was spat on, when she came out to buy groceries, and then she was called Corona, and also she was spat on. Now, when she had gone to file an FIR, actually, there's no law as such, for actually punishing this kind of perpetrators. So law itself, like for example, it is also very important. Like, there has to be some deterrence, in a way that, because if there is, so we have been actually uprising. If you ever remember a young boy from Arunachal Pradesh who was lynched and who was killed in the Lajpat Nagar. So after that, there was a committee called Desh Barua Committee was constituted. So I was also one of the committee members, and so a lot of recommendations has been, submitted many collectively from people across India, from all the Northeast people. And there, one of the major recommendations is about amendment of IPC, that is IPC 153C, so that if anybody is called Chiki, Chowmin, or any other derogatory terms, that they have to be penalized, as per law of the land, and should be non-bailable. A lot of stringent action should be taken against the perpetrators. So all these things are not there. So when these things are not there, then everybody they know that they will be free. They will not be punished. So this itself is also one way where they continue to do that. So also that there are two things here. One is that yes, some people don't really understand. They don't really know, because as I say, education in a kind of terms of awareness, in terms of even like media, nothing is being focused or nothing is being talked about the Northeast India. So therefore, awareness level is very low, and so some people are not really aware of it. But there are other people who are aware of it, but in order to stereotype, and they were actually deliberately calling Corona Chinky, Chinese, Chowmin, Momo, you go back to China. So there are two things here. One, level of people who don't really understand, who don't really know that this kind of people exist in different parts of the country or in the northeastern region. Another one is that knowingly they're also trying to cheat, or they're trying to, call all this kind of derogatory terms. So law has to be in place. We need a very strict law to punish the perpetrators. The other one is, of course, awareness. And also, yes, all these sports persons can also be used as an ambassador, to talk about the Northeast India. Now is the right time actually they have to, because the entire country is so engrossed and is so, like excited, and then they're celebrating. So now is the right time to talk about the culture, different people culture, their food habits, all these kind of things can be talked about Manipur, or Assam, or other parts of in the northeast states. So this is the right time. I think if they are really serious about it, yes, government can also should play a very important role, because you have the INB ministry. You can put up something in the international airport where a lot of people are coming, going. So you can put up about the Northeast people. You have the tourist places, monumental places, like you have Taj Mahal, you have Red Fort. Whenever any Northeast persons go there, they will be asked for their identity card. When they show also, then they will say, no, you are not from this country. So I do face the same thing, and my nieces and nephews also always say they have been turned down and not allowed to enter, to Taj Mahal and all. So a lot of frustrations, is being there, because when you are being denied like that in many places.
So it's unfortunate. I mean, it's in a sense a battle for identity, and yet that's a conflict of, the identity itself is bringing out this conflict. Very, very unfortunate. Kaustubh, I want to ask you, have we normalized this kind of behavior, discrimination, racism? Have we just normalized it?
Yeah, I mean, on a general level, when it comes to mass reaction, it's been normalized to a large extent. But thanks to a lot of, action, protest in last few years, also there is there is some kind of also some resistance to this. Like as Alana just said, IPC has been modified and now it's an offense. So there is resistance to that. Largely it has been normalized in a sense, but more and more people are being kind of answered back. Now people are standing up also against this kind of discrimination. In last few years at least, in the sense there is some sensitization happening in a long run. So that's how I would see. But you're right that, I mean, at some level these things have come to be accepted as not a big deal kind of an attitude, right? I mean, it's been justified in many ways. But again, the resistance to that also, all the kind of protest to that also is on the rise. It's been steadily, there are different groups, different kind of circles who have been raising this point at different levels, at the judicial level, at the level of street protest, at the level of different writings also. Like a lot of good literature has come out from Northeast. Different publication houses have come out with good literature that shows the diversity and the variety of voices from within Northeast. So those critical intervention has also come up in last kind of couple of years or so. So that is the positive that I find. That is a positive kind of direction that I see happening. More and more dialogue, like even this dialogue we are having today, perhaps 10 years back could not have been possible. So this type of awareness, this type of a realization has come on at different kind of spaces at different level. But I would like to also, since our theme is Northeast beyond the medal, I would like to draw attention to another kind of a very interesting kind of a story that all of us, of course, know that how Mirabai Chanu, after winning, coming back to Manipur, she wanted to look for the truck drivers. Yeah. And meet the truck drivers who helped her, in the whole training process, and which is very reflective of Northeast, this little story. Because, Northeast, despite the stereotype of conflict and violence, a place of kind of, some kind of aggressiveness, we also have this society which is very friendly, respectful, and a lot of, support inside the society, the support system. Now, I'm sorry to say, but this type of a story perhaps would not have been possible in quote-unquote mainland India. Like a girl in the evening will, the first people the girl will run away is maybe the truck drivers in the evening. So, I mean, so this contrast, this type of, this reality, which is very sweet and very kind of, reflective of the goodness that is still there in Northeast. Despite years of conflict, despite years of trauma, there is a lot of good in the society, which we should bring out. This should be the occasions to talk about this type of realities also. So I think we should all talk about these issues. We should know who are those people, who are those truck drivers. Their stories should come. What is their understanding of sports, perhaps? How they fit into the larger scheme. So that is how, I mean, we have to kind of, go about it. So I think these mini stories, these real stories in the background.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I wanted to actually end on a positive note and a quick quick answers from all of you before I let you go. We can continue this conversation. It can carry on. I've got lots more questions, but I've already overstepped that time. Asila, starting with you. What is the positive that you see coming out of everything? What is that one thing you think that we can do more for inclusion?
So I think the inclusion can happen if you create that space. I think each one of us who have managed in different ways in a different platform to create a space of the diversity that we represent. If we continue, maybe like what Alana said, collectively, and get the larger platform to start talking about it, I think that will be a positive window. And I think, as Turba just mentioned, the stories of truck drivers, right? I mean, if we take it from there to start with this today's conversation, and we dive deeper about each one of them, the cultural identity, and you could never think of a young girl getting into a truck and being safe, but it happened in the Northeast, right? So you bring in positive stories about safety that takes place in a region where builds up, people who become winners. So I think these are an important element of people coming together who have managed to make it, who have struggled to make it, who have, fight to make it, and then getting the support of the states and getting the support of the larger spaces to amplify these stories. I think that's quite a way forward. I would see it.
Absolutely. Alana, you?
I think for me, I have a lot of positive feeling in the younger generation. See, India is a diverse country, as we all know, and actually it has been ruled by the very deep-rooted traditional mindset. That is the reason why the younger generation are facing a lot of problems. I mean, like to adjust with this young old mindset. So now these things are going away. So in the younger generation, I think things will change. Like maybe from 10 to 20 years. So this young generation, which I'm talking about, is not only the Northeast alone, but I'm talking about across India, because there has been a lot of interaction now happening, between students, also maybe in organizations, in some kind of cultural festivals. So a lot of actually good things are also happening. Of course, this is to a minimum level, but if this continues, and when this younger generation become leaders one day, I'm sure we'll have a better policy in place, not like the selfish or not like the policy that is right now, the system which is not really supporting, this kind of, or promoting this kind of diversity. But I think there will be a lot of good things coming in the hands of the younger generation. This is what I believe. And yes, the other thing is that yes, Northeast is so beautiful, and I really welcome all of you to come and visit, the different states of the Northeast, because we have its uniqueness. Like each state has its own uniqueness, and you'll find so many things that can be one part of an education for you. So I feel that I invite all of you to come and visit. And today we're talking like this because of Lavina, because of Mirabai, and I really am proud of these ladies who have brought laurels to this country. And this is, of course, maybe momentary, this may be long term, but of course, we should also be positive and celebrate this moment as a country altogether.
Absolutely lovely words, Alana. And I'm going to take that invitation personally, because Shillong really was on my travel list last year. I mean,
you're most welcome to come down.
So hopefully maybe next year. Kaustubh, I'm leaving you with the last words. I know you already started this round of very positive, outlook at things. Do you see that day coming when, not just sports, but there's more inclusion for, even creative arts? Inclusion
Absolutely.
in every sphere.
Absolutely. I mean, in the form of Lavlina and Mirabai, we have two fantastic role models. So that's for me the takeaway from this Olympics, is that we have this fantastic two young sportswomen as role model. So much can be kind of done with that. This is a very great opportunity actually. And I mean, one can kind of start scouting for talents in small towns. Also curb politicization of sports. That is one thing we did not get time to talk about, but it's also time for politics to step out of sports, because we have seen everywhere how kind of politicians are there in almost all sports bodies are captured. So to make it more so-called professional with good coaches, which is a very big kind of critical importance. So I mean, from there we can make it, of course, a story of inclusion, hopefully, But for that, people have to make an effort. If you're just happy with this, momentary focus, celebrating their victory just for a few days with hoardings and maybe ads in newspapers, and then forget the bigger picture, that will not do so. We have to continue this type of conversations and try to, bring out the real person in them, place them in their concrete situations, and then try to know Northeast through their stories. So I think in that way, if one can go, perhaps definitely, I am hopeful that, it
Absolutely.
can begin a chapter of inclusion.
Absolutely
Yeah,
wonderful. And when you were talking about sports bodies and the politicization, that is again also something that is pan-India. It's something that I wrote about in my
of course,
last
of
column,
course.
actually, that, that's the one thing that continues to hamper a lot of them because, we see the success of them, but we don't see the route they have had to take to reach this, this pinnacle in a sense. But that, of course, the Bible call you and everybody else again for, this discussion as well, because it's an entirely different a discussion which will take another half an hour, 45 minutes of its own. But for now, Hasina, Alana, and Kaustubh, I'm very, very grateful that you all have taken the time
Pleasure.
out to join me. And it was wonderful to start this conversation. And as Hasina said, we have to have more conversations, and I will. And I hope to see you guys back here very soon. And thanks so much for joining me today.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.